Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Daniel Hess, writer, filmmaker, and poet. Please enjoy Daniel Hess. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Daniel Hess, a writer, filmmaker, and poet. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited to chat about creativity, and you have quite a unique story, and I look forward to hearing more than I have read on your website and in your bio. But before we dive into questions and creativity, why don't you just take a couple minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Daniel Hess. I am a writer, filmmaker, poet in the Baltimore, Maryland area. I was born and raised here. I had an interesting life growing up. Two younger sisters. Had a pretty normal childhood up until there was a bit of tragedy within the family when I lost my cousin, who was also kind of my best friend, to cystic fibrosis when he was 14 and I was only 10 at the time. So that really had a pretty big impact on my life kind of going forward from there. But that's also kind of the point where the creativity started happening. I went from being just a kid playing rec football and thinking about sports and, all that goofy stuff to realizing that death was kind of a thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I started kind of writing a little bit here and there. And as my life moved forward, I went through school, really took into that hardcore, took that really seriously, and was actually going to go off to college to do pharmacology. And at the last second realized that math was not my strong suit like I thought it might have been. And had a really good friend who was getting into film and suggested maybe I should look into that. And at the time I was writing a lot. So I was like, hey, if I can write and also have stuff be made that people can then watch, that's pretty cool. So I just went with it. And for a very long time, I kind of stuck with film and videography. And then when COVID happened, everything sort of shut down, including a lot of video production. So I started writing again and I realized, man, I feel this is much more in my element than filmmaking was, and sort of have been pivoting more into just strictly writing stories and trying to let other creatives interpret kind of what I've written down on the page into film and things like that. So that's about 30 years in a quick little synopsis.
I love it. Thanks. Yeah. I'm so curious. You said something about the pivoting during COVID from stepping away from filmmaking and more into writing. What was that spark for you to pivot? I mean, I understand COVID happened and filmmaking wasn't as accessible, but what did you notice came up for you, or how did you know writing felt more authentic, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, it was just this thing that was sort of developing. For many years, I've been writing like poems, when I kind of get flashes of inspiration, just writing them on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And that had been kind of building. And then really what I think happened was during the whole time I was sort of really enmeshed into like filmmaking and doing video production and stuff. I honestly I wasn't really reading.
Oh.
And finally in like I think it was 2018, maybe 2019, I randomly saw this video about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, and had this sudden like spark of like, well, let me look into these guys some more. And next thing you know, I was reading the book Heavier Than Heaven, which was all about his life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the first time in a long time I really read something that completely like enveloped me. And I started just reading a lot more, and it really made me feel like, okay, like this is something that has a lot more depth than I think I was giving it kind of credit for.
Yeah.
You know, and I think kind of that was like, you know, when you're going through school and stuff, you're kind of forced to read books, and they're not always the most interesting, and you're writing reports and it's not fun. So I
Mm-hmm.
think for a long time, reading almost seemed like maybe a chore because of that sort of like upbringing with it.
Yeah.
Um, but once I was able to just sit down and sort of pick and choose who I wanted to really read and kind of look into, it sort of made like a bigger difference. And I think that, coupled with the fact that, you know, I had made a film in early 2019, and I kind of just rushed through it. You know, I really hadn't made a film, like a creative piece, in a long time. And when I was sitting there watching it, because it got accepted into like a local film festival, when I was watching it was great to see like the way the audience took it,
Mm-hmm.
because it really made me realize like all of the story pieces that I missed kind of explaining and getting out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I really saw the value in taking the time to actually craft like a script from start to finish. And so really thinking about all that, COVID happening, I was sort of dealing with a lot of personal issues too. I was still kind of getting over an old breakup that was really tumultuous in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And this story kind of became this way for me to get that out and also just kind of flow with things. And it just all sort of like, you just couldn't have planned it like any better. It all just coalesced into this like being of creativity that sort of just exploded out all at once.
Nice. I love that. And what a great reminder about how we had to read in school versus not being in school, and now the choice to read and choosing what you read. That's a really great reminder of like we have so much choice when we're not in school, or even maybe when we are in
Mm-hmm.
school. But I really like that reminder to read the things you want to read and find out what they are, right?
Exactly.
Nice. Well, you've kind of already talked about creativity, but before we dive in too deep, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Well, I used to think creativity was like this sudden spark, you know, that sort
Mm-hmm.
of would pop out, and you would just be like, okay, I have this thing. But really, to me, it's almost like it's got to be this combination of the spark and also keeping like, it's almost like having like a lamp with light with fluid in it, right? You need to keep the spark kind of burning.
Yeah.
Um, because I've had several times in my life where I'm like, oh, I have this great idea. I'm going to do like this post-apocalyptic story and all this stuff. And then I start typing away. And then next thing you know, it's sort of, you get like maybe a couple pages in and you're just like, well, that really just faded out really quick. Um, so I think you really have to have this great crossroads of like having that spark, and then also kind of telling your brain to like, okay, we have this idea, let's let it gestate. Or, you know, that's when you get the whiteboard out and you start writing, okay, this character, I like this. And then this story beat can be connected to this other character that I really like. And you just really have to formulate that out. Because if you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like go, you know, like way out into it and just start typing away, you're going to lose steam. Like it's just inevitable.
Yeah. How do you recharge those sparks for yourself?
Well, the best thing that worked for me, especially when I was writing like my script over the last year, has been really just exercising.
Yeah.
So like whenever I'm like stuck on something, I like really got to in my head that like, okay, it's okay to walk away. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like one of the first things you really got to teach yourself is like, when you walk away, it doesn't mean you're like defeated at all. It just means you know something's there, but it's just not quite coming out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And for me, just going on a run or going on a bike ride and just like blasting some music that you really enjoy
Mhm.
is just like this great thing, because eventually the idea somehow always comes out, and it's just this like that those are those like spark moments. And then what I
Mhm.
like to do is, instead of just stopping everything and then hurrying up and trying to write it all down, I really just let it cycle. Like I love
Mm.
that like process of just letting
Mhm.
something spin and spin and spin, because usually it's a great initial idea, but it still does need that little bit of time to bake. And like as it bakes, it's
Yeah.
like gets better and better, because then you're like, oh, well, I initially thought maybe I could have this character be at like this event, but if I put them here, then like that's going to flow way better into the rest of the story or something.
Mhm. Nice. So in taking the break and exercising and or going on a bike ride, do you consider that to be part of creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way it really flows into it, because
Mhm.
I think it's like your brain is moving and everything, but I think when your brain is sort of like in the back of your mind you're thinking about it, but in the front you're like running, it's that like little bit of tuning out that you do that I think really helps to like
Mm.
bring those things out,
Yeah.
especially with like music and everything, because I just find that like when I listen to a lot of songs, I just kind of make up stories that flow with those songs.
Mhm.
So it's just
Yeah.
helpful to like hear that song and then think of my characters in a situation or something and just sort
Okay.
of like play it all out as if it's, I always say it's almost like a stage play in my head. Like I can kind of
Yeah.
see it that way when I
Nice.
listen to songs and stuff like that, especially.
What's what songs are on rotation for you right now?
Well, I have to. So growing up, I mean, I was big into like alt rock and all that kind of stuff and grunge and everything. But as I've gotten older, I had my like transition, because high school it was all like emo music and screamo.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly a lot of like hip hop too.
Great.
But as I've gotten older, I've sort of transitioned over to like more electronic based music.
Okay.
So I like a lot of like I guess deep house kind of stuff is really neat. And
Mhm.
but even just that like real high energy, crazy stuff that's just beats at everything going on.
Mhm.
Um, I find that it's like that cacophony really just kind of like helps me tune out.
Yeah.
But then there's like days where it's just, I go like completely classical some days,
Mhm.
and that's super helpful too.
Nice. I love hearing what people are listening to. I think it's a part of the creative process, you know. I'm always so amazed when people can create to like really intense music because that's not my creative experience, but it sounds like you have the capacity. I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. Nice. Well, I'm going to take a little turn and ask, what's your earliest memory of being creative?
Um, well, I'd say, like I was saying before, it was really around the whole like kind of losing my cousin
Yeah.
to CF was, I think, the first time that I really felt like there was like, I guess, a validity in like getting things out. Um, and so it really just made me feel like it was okay to kind of have those emotions and write them down and experience that. Because yeah, that was really, I think, my start into writing any kind of like poetic things or just even like journaling or stuff like that.
Yeah.
um but I guess if I go like even a tiny bit deeper, like I grew up watching a lot of like Godzilla movies, like
Oh,
from the
nice.
60s and 70s.
Uh-huh.
On the old VHS. And I can remember like, basically I guess pseudo like fan fiction where I would think of like stories of like Godzilla fighting some monster or something like that. So I guess if I wanted to say the youngest point, it would probably be then, where I was just like thinking of little goofy stories that Godzilla could get into.
Yeah. Imagination. Like we as kids have a lot of it. It sounds like, but it sounds like really writing was such a, or creating your own stories really brought a lot of joy. And how do you think, I guess I'm so curious, how did you carry that throughout your life? Like it sounds like it started pretty young and then maybe you had a sidestep into pharmacology and now back into more writing and filmmaking. How do you think
Yeah.
you sustained it?
I mean, I think it's just one of those kind of like those natural things. I guess, it's like how I'm always amazed when I see like someone drawing, right? Because like I've never been good at drawing. And, I'll talk to people as they do it and they're just like, yeah, I mean, it's not that good. And you're just like, what? Like, that was great. I feel like writing has almost been that way for me, where it's just like, I kind of just write things and people are like, this is really good. And I'm like, I guess I don't, I don't know. I mean, I just put it out on a piece of paper. I think it's kind of silly, but whatever. So it's always been one of those things that's just been like kind of a natural kind of feeling for me. But I think throughout my life, there's always been these, I don't want to say distractions, maybe that's too hard of a word, but just like things in life, like with my parents, my whole family, like I'm really the first kind of like artistic person in the family. So like for my parents, it was a lot of like, hey, I know you want to be creative and stuff, but you should also kind of maybe think about like your career and making money, that kind of stuff. And so that's where I think the pharmacology really came from too, was a lot of that. And then film was just kind of that thing that was like a good middle ground, I think. So even film really, like, as much as I love to do it and I love to experiment with it, I don't think it's as natural as the writing. I think I didn't have anybody I could really talk to at the time that had done writing, and I didn't really see where I could even go anywhere with it really, like, especially in like 2008. I just felt like, what am I going to do with like writing a bunch of stuff, And so as it's gotten, I guess, more democratized for people, now with self-publishing being so easy and all that, I felt like I can finally kind of get back into it and try to have some kind of a career in it and everything. But yeah, I just think it's just been really just life with like needing to pay for bills. Like after I moved out, that was a big thing, of course. And, I was doing kind of event videography and weddings and stuff. And there's nothing kind of more of a creative vampire than doing weddings, to be honest. I don't like to badmouth it, but it is very tough to do, and you can make good money, but man, if you're not really committed to it, like, it is not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only imagine, having sung at weddings. I understand the wedding scene, but yeah, what was it like to tell your parents, I'm going to go into filmmaking and I'm not going to go into pharmacology? Or like, were they supportive? I'm curious what that story is.
They were, I think, apprehensively supportive.
Okay, fair.
They were like, look, we get it. We know that the pharmacology might not be the thing. And, for a little bit, I was minoring in psychology too, just to kind of like have something on the side if I needed it. But even that, like, sort of kind of fizzled out after a while. But yeah, no, I mean, to their credit, like, they were as supportive as they certainly could be. And I always appreciate that, because it's not like, they still helped pay for the college and everything. And they didn't say, okay, you're not doing pharmacology, so we're not paying for it, or, try to pull that kind of stuff. So I will always be thankful for that, because it helped me, to come out of college. There wasn't like debt there and everything. So I feel like I was very fortunate in that regard. But yeah, I think that for a long time they were kind of really like worried about if I could make something out of it and everything, which, I mean, it was hard, especially the first couple of years. I mean, there's no getting around that. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you wish that they would have done something different?
I don't know. I don't think I could wish that they would have done anything different. I really think, like, they certainly did the best they could, considering that, like, there's no kind of, I guess, other family members to turn to that could have like said, hey, like, this is how you can do it. And, because I've done it successfully or anything.
Right.
So we all kind of, went into it pretty blind.
Yeah.
And for that, I give them credit for sure.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. Was there anything that you would like hope that other people's parents would say to them if they have like they want to go into a creative career and parents may think that's not the most financially secure? Like what would you want to hear from a parent in that regard?
Well, I mean, I always say, like, looking back on it, I think one of the best things you can probably do, like, whatever creative field you're getting into, I think there's still a lot of merit to taking some like business classes in addition
Yeah.
to that.
Mhm.
Um, because, I was lucky. One of the first people that I sort of was connected with out of college was a corporate video kind of guy who ran his own company.
Oh wow.
And so, yeah, as soon as I got out, like I kind of watched him and kind of the way he interacted with clients and all the booking and kind of customer service side of things. And
Mhm.
that really gave me like a very strong kind of like foundation for when I wanted to kind of do things in my own business capacity.
Mhm.
Um, cause I, at my peak with like doing the weddings and stuff, I mean, I was netting like a little over or a little like at 100K a year,
Mhm.
just doing weddings. And that was all kind of just from watching him do it. So,
Yeah.
but I saw a lot of folks that I graduated with that, ended up not doing film anymore just because they couldn't figure that out. But that's as a
Mhm.
result of them, I think, not really focusing on taking at least a couple business things or at least studying that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's one of the most like overlooked parts, I think, is that you should really know kind of if you're going to try to start like your own company, especially in the video world, like know the
Mhm.
business side, um, or get yourself like enmeshed with like another production company as, like a junior editor or just somewhere that you can actually be like making secure money when you get out of school. Cause if you don't have that lined up, that's when I think a lot of people fail and end up not being able to stay in the industry,
Mhm.
um, because they're just not sustaining themselves, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of talented people that, don't get to go very far because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying too is like there's a lot of creativity that relies on business. Like and there's a lot of creativity in business too, and in that business component for, funding and fueling creativity as well.
Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of hurdles to get through for sure.
Yeah. Nice. Well, speaking of hurdles, what's an everyday issue that you've had to use creativity to solve?
Hmm. Everyday issue. Uh, I mean, I guess for me, like I always have issues like especially before, just kind of weeding through like distractions.
Mm,
And so like, playing on the phone too much or, just sitting there and getting stuck in the computer loop of like emails and all that kind of stuff.
mhm,
Um, so really like what's helped me kind of break up all of that was, kind of the rediscovering of reading and everything else. I think
mm,
sitting down with the book is like it's something that I feel like is a hard barrier for a lot of people, and it certainly was for me for a long time. But
mhm,
I'd say like that is sort of my kind of mental, spiritual like reset,
mm,
where
mhm.
I can read something and get lost in it, and also it just like my eyes feel better, like everything just feels a little better when I'm just reading like a actual just printed on book rather
Yeah.
than another screen.
Mhm,
um and so for me, like I think that's my kind of creative way of just getting myself away from everything for a little bit,
mhm,
and just sort of like having a nice like reset. So I usually try to do that like at least some point, in my day after I get back from work or before I
mhm.
go to bed or something like that.
Nice. I like that. all these reminders to read. I think
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Get out there and read, kiddos.
What are you reading these days? I know you mentioned the Nirvana book about their life, but what else is on your bedside table?
Yeah, so right now, I've been trying to go through like periods with just reading a bunch of books from like one specific writer. So like last year I went through like Hemingway, and I just pretty much like plowed through all the Hemingway novels.
Nice.
So right now I'm getting into Kafka.
Oh,
Um, and it's interesting because I watched these videos about him and sort of researched his life a little bit, and he was just had this very interesting life, and his books are good, but they're just like they're very slow and methodical, and at first I was a little lost because I was kind of not understanding the really 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 dry humor that's in all of it.
okay.
And so now that I've sort of figured out, like, man, this is really, really, really dry wit. It sort of has made the reading a lot easier because I was almost frustrated. Like, come on, like, what are we doing here? Like, this is just going and going and going. So yeah, that's who I'm going through right now. So I'm reading his. It's like a collection of his shorter stories right now that I'm reading.
Nice. What made you decide to like read authors like and as opposed to, picking one author and then picking a different author?
I just think there's like for me, there's a lot of value in like reading kind of, I guess what you could call like classics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, like reading Hemingway was really kind of like it helped me unlock that sort of like descriptive style of writing that I kind of knew was like there, but I didn't really know how to like express it very well.
Mm-hmm.
So after sort of reading all his books and sort of studying his writing style, it's really like helped to kind of inform me in the way I like am trying to write, my own like novel that I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value in just kind of like looking at these classic authors, kind of reading and getting their different styles and sort of taking away from that. So yeah, and I think I just randomly one day was like, you know what? I've never read like Hemingway, and people have always said he's not like they don't like him. So I was like, maybe I'll see if I like him. And then I was like, oh, okay. It's, some of his stories are problematic in the way they have aged, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still like really, really good writing. You have to give him credit for that at least.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And I mean, throughout our conversation, I feel like you have shared bits and pieces about how others could find creativity and through reading and writing, but how would you encourage others to find creativity just in their life in general?
I think like one of the best things you can do for yourself is really to kind of not like discount like what you're doing in your life as sort
Mm.
of like fodders for stories or like bits of poetry to write, because like
Mhm.
I really like it took me to sort of discover a lot of other writers who were writing like very kind of mundane like poems, in college. And I was like, whoa, you can write about this? Like I I'd always wanted to write about it, but I felt like it was just, pointless. But no, there's
Mhm.
value to it. So I think it's important to like just kind of look on your life and sort of reflect back sometimes and kind of use that for your own inspiration for either like what you're trying to write or if you're trying to make a film or things like that. I think it's really like the experiences that you kind of go through that make for the most kind of like truthful stories,
Mhm.
I mean, again, going back to like Hemingway, I think he was the one who said like write what you know or
Yeah.
something like that, which isn't always exactly true, but I think it's a good base. It's a good base for things to kind of build off of.
Mhm. Nice. Yeah, I think that's a great way to encourage people writing what you know or writing your experience. And what were some of the mundane poems about that you read in college?
Well, the one I read that really struck me, and I always remember, was a poem about a woman wrote, and I can't remember the poet. I wish I could, but she was just writing about the time that she lost her virginity in the back of a Volkswagen bus in like the 70s.
Oh, there you go. That feels maybe less mundane than like brushing your teeth. That feels like it's profound and, a marker in your life.
Yeah. It was just very kind of like, just very kind of dry and to the point. And it just seemed like, okay, you can sort of just write about these, like, to that point, I really thought like you had to write about these like, very pivotal things in this very like huge language or very flat, like not flowery, but like flowing sort of language. And this one was just kind of like, yep, like this is what happened. And that's what I did while it happened. And that was it. And so it was just like, whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah. A new way to express creativity or be creative or see creativity through new eyes or a different lens. Nice. That's awesome. Well, this has been such a treat to chat with you. And I have one final question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
I can describe it as at the end of the day, I feel insanely accomplished. More so than any other like thing has ever like brought me. So like when I have a good day of just writing, even if everything else to that point was kind of like a junky day, or maybe I was just really slow on the drop or whatever, like if I get that session of writing in that I'm just like, yes, this is what it needed to be, then it's like I go to bed with a smile on my face because I'm just like, that was perfect. And so that's what it feels like. It's this weird like just accomplishment that it's like you win, like just won the Super Bowl or something, it just feels really good.
Nice. I love it. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And if people want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah. So the easiest way is through the production company that I have's website, which is tonyproductions.com. And that's just, it's TO, not the number 2, TONY productions.com. And that has all my film work. It has a lot of stuff about my writing work. And then I have a really active blog where I do film reviews and things like that. So that's the easiest way, I'd say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting about creativity. It's been delightful.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.